Alright, so welcome back, and in this clip we'll talk about the turbulence field. Well, a turbulence field can create an effect of a 3D noise, and it creates the disturbances inside the particle's behavior. And the most important attribute of this field is the frequency, which decides how often the disturbances will repeat and affect the particle behavior. So let's do one thing. Let's select this 3D text and apply the turbulence field on this when it actually emits the particles. So go inside the particles menu, use this command emit from the object, and then we have the emitter type set to the surface with quite a high rate, that is 7500, with speed almost set to the 0. We don't want the 3D text to emit the particles with some speed. Hit the option create. Now if you play the timeline, you can notice the particles are under the gravity. So let's press Ctrl A and get rid of this gravity. Let's ignore the solver gravity, and let's hide the text for a moment. Let's play the timeline and notice now you can see the particles have started appearing on the 3D text. So let's do one thing. Let's increase the time slider a bit more, and let's play the timeline. And now let's initialize the 148 frame so that we can save and store the values at frame 1. So select the particles, move inside the field solvers, use this option initial state, set for selected. Alright, so if I roll back, you can see particles have clearly retained their positions. So get rid of the emitter, because now if you play the timeline, the particles will further started getting emitting from this 3D text. So right now we would like to use only this much particles. We don't want any further particles, so you can simply delete the emitters. Now let's move inside the shading node and change the point size to the 1. Let's also add some color, let's say dark red, and enable the color accumulation, so the overlapping particles will have some more better illuminations. Alright, so select the particles, go inside the field solver and use the field turbulence. Alright, now let's move inside the attribute editor of the turbulence field. We have the magnitude, which controls the overall strength of the fields. We have the attenuation, so at the moment we don't need to use this. And this is really very important, which is the frequency that I have already discussed with you a moment ago, which decides the overall the disturbances, or you may could say the rate of occurrence of the disturbance. Alright, so let's do one thing. Let's play the timeline and take down the effect of this turbulence field. And now this is affecting the particles behavior. So you can see now particles are completely random. They are moving randomly. Some of the particles are moving in this directions, in this direction. There is as such no fixed particular shape. So this is how turbulence work. But we can create some more better text effects with the help of this. Let's do one thing. Let's roll the timeline back, move inside the dynamic sections, the dynamic properties, and decrease the value of conserve. So this will going to dip down the overall velocities of the particles, which are taking their effect from the turbulence field. So let's dip the value to, let's say, 0.3. Alright, now if you play the timeline, you can see the turbulence field is now acting upon the particles, and it's taking a bit longer time to execute its force because of the conserve. Alright, so now let's do one thing. Increase the turbulence field with a magnitude of, let's say, 50. And now if you play the timeline, you can see we are getting some nice and interesting effect, because now particles are not just able to move, they are just moving based upon the values of frequency. Alright, so as if for now these particles are creating some kind of a noise, but they're still at their own positions. What if we just want to animate the phase? What if we just want to move them in a x positive direction? So we can achieve this if we use this option phase x. Well, we have other attributes also, xyz, but at the moment, like I said, I just want these particles to move in the x positive direction. So for that I use this option phase x. And for this, let's do one thing. Let's key this value, set key, and give the value of, let's say, 5. Put a key over here, and let's say at frame 150 or maybe 200 we use the negative value. Let's say we go for -10. Alright, and put a key over here. That's nice. So now if I play the timeline, you see the particles will move in the x positive directions. And with this, now we can say yes, now the text effect is getting more interesting, more better. All right. So we can also add one more interesting thing, that is we can dissolve the overall particles by controlling the opacity of the particle object. Now at the moment I'm not talking about the per particle, I'm talking about the entire particle object. So we can achieve this. Let's say put a key over here, and let's say at the last frame 200, let's make this value to 0 and set the key over here. And now if we play the timeline, you can notice as soon as the particle reaches towards the end of this time slider, they will eventually dissolve, and this is something really very nice. All right, so that was all about the turbulence field, but I also would like to talk about the frequency. This is something really very important, as I already mentioned. So with the default value we got that effect. Now what if we just dip down the value? Let's say we use a value of zero point 0.1, and this will really create a very different kind of effect, as you can see. Actually something not really very interesting also, because now the pattern of disturbances are getting at a very longer intervals of the time. So I must say that we should use a value of, let's say, 1.25, and let's say we can also animate this thing. Let's say we put a key over here with a value of 1.5, and at the last frames, let's say we use a value of 0.25 or maybe zero point 0.5. Now set the key and play the time slider. So you notice the disturbances were quite small and repetitive, have now just stopped repeating themselves because of the lower values. Alright, so that was all about the turbulence field, and I hope so you must have understood the concept of turbulence field. Now let's move to our next clip where we talk about the volume axis field.